Hello and welcome to this TUC Wales webinar on emotional intelligence. My name is David Pardey from the Professional Development Centre. In this short session, I just want to explain a little bit about our emotions, how they affect our thinking and our behaviour, and outline some simple strategies you can use to ensure that you enjoy a more positive emotional response, particularly when you're working under pressure or facing challenges, like many have been during the coronavirus crisis, for example. We'll start by emphasising that emotions are a normal and natural response to events and people throughout our lives. In fact, being emotional is part of what makes us human. Most people respond emotionally in very similar ways to similar kinds of stimulus. Some people will tend to respond more, they have a stronger emotional response, others a bit less. And it's important to recognise this because whilst most people will behave the same as you, you may well find that some people seem to be more emotional or less emotional than you. And to understand that this spread of different responses is quite normal and natural. So let's start by looking at what causes us to respond emotionally. We are constantly receiving external signals from our environment. We see things, we hear things, we smell, taste, touch things. And each of them will give us an emotional response. Generally, some very weak because they're not particularly important, others much more serious or significant. And the way that they affect us is partly learned throughout different societies. We learn to respond differently. If you were presented with a sea slug to eat, for example, many people in a Western country like the UK would probably find it a little bit disgusting. However, in other parts of the world, it's a delicacy, and you can learn to switch from disgust to happiness through the experience of doing something. But behind that, we've got this set of innate emotional responses, and most researchers tend to suggest it's about 5 or 6 core emotions that can be combined in different ways. You can have a pleasant surprise and you can have angry surprise, depending upon what the stimulus is. What I want to do is to look at just one source of environmental signals, which is seeing things, simply to illustrate the way that emotions work. When we see something, the signal comes in to our eyes, and from there goes to the back of our brain, the primary visual cortex, which first processes that data. If it looks like a face, it goes to the fusiform gyrus, which specialises in recognising faces. And even if it's not someone we've met before, we're quite good at seeing likenesses to other people. Now, this is important because the signal is then sent to 2 different places. It goes to the limbic area, particularly the amygdala, which is our emotional core and lies near the base of our brain. And so we will have an emotional response to what we've seen. If it's someone we don't like, or if it looks like someone we don't like, we will experience a negative emotional response. It may not be a strong one, but it will be there. And then the signal from the amygdala goes to the frontal cortex, where it matches the signal which has come from the fusiform gyrus. And it arrives at the same time because the signals that go to and from our emotional core tend to work much faster. So as soon as we see something in our higher brain, which is where we make decisions, solve problems, and store memories, we will already have had an emotional response. I'm seeing this and I'm going to like it because it reminds me of something that I like or someone that I like. Or conversely, this is something that I don't like, and therefore I'm going to feel negative about it. And obviously, therefore, we are going to be more or less responsive to an event or a person because of that emotional state. Most of the time, we start from a relatively calm, neutral emotional state, but some things can make us feel angry, some very angry, but a lot of things will just cause us mild irritation. And if it's a constant stimulus that is causing that, then we will have this background feeling of irritation that I shouldn't have to be doing this. Similarly, there are some things which will make us very frightened, but there are other things which, although only a mild stimulus, are causing a background level of anxiety. And then there are some things which can make us feel seriously depressed, but there's other things which just make us feel a little bit unhappy. So you can imagine if you're feeling a constant low level of irritation, anxiety or unhappiness, particularly if you've got them all combined, this is not going to be good for your mental welfare. So what can you do about this? And that's the point of this, this webinar. Step one is to recognize how you're feeling. When we've got a very strong emotional response, it becomes immediately apparent. But these low-level, constant background emotional responses can easily be overlooked. So think about how you're feeling. And this is what's called reflection. It's basically a process of conscious thought of how do I actually feel at the moment. Having recognized how you're feeling, and particularly if it's a negative emotion, then you can use a technique called anchoring to try and overcome this and replace that negative emotion with a more positive one. This simple technique involves recalling something which was really enjoyable, something that is a really strong positive emotion. Could be when you got married, you had your first child, you've got the job you enjoy, you achieved something really important in your life, won a race, whatever it might be, something that generates that strong positive emotion. Now, what you have to do is ideally shut your eyes and bring that memory to life in your head. So what did you see? What did you hear? What did you hear? What did you feel? What did you touch? What did you taste? What did you smell? Get all those memories building up in your head. And what you'll find is that alongside those external stimuli that you're recalling, your emotional response to them will also be generated. It'll be quite mild, but it will be there. The more often you recall that memory, the easier it becomes to recall, the clearer it becomes in your head, but more importantly, the stronger that positive emotional response. I can recall very clearly a moment a couple of hours after my first child was born, and even just talking about it now, I can feel my body responding with that strong positive emotion that I felt at the time. And because that is my recall memory, that's my anchoring memory. Finally, as well as creating that initial anchoring positive emotion, focus on a positive end goal. If it's a task you've got to perform, if it's a meeting you've got to go to, if it's a person you've got to speak to, think about what it is that you would look forward to as a result of that meeting, that event, that person's conversation, and use that positive end goal as something to give you a target that you can work towards. These three techniques are relatively simple. You can get better at them simply by practicing. First time you do it, you might find it doesn't seem to have much effect. The 10th time you do it, you'll find that it has a much more significant and stronger impact on you and your thinking and your feeling. So don't ignore emotions, recognize that they're there. Use your positive anchor to help overcome any strong negative emotions, and think about positive end goals as a way of motivating you and stimulating you in a positive way. Thank you very much for listening. There is a handout to go with this, which explains some of these ideas in more detail and also has links to some external resources that you might find useful. Good luck.